Okay, wonderful. Hello, everyone. It's Giselle here from Kids Yoga Stories, and I am truly honored to share with you my teacher from Sydney, Katie Rose. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here, Katie. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, just some context, Katie. I was thinking about just before we chatted about how we met. And so I came to Sydney as a backpacker. Luke and I were taking classes, yoga classes at your amazing studio. Our favorite was the $5 lunch classes, right? And then after we got married, we took the yoga teacher training with you. And that was in 2005. Like
Wow.
that kind of blows my mind. So now, fast forward to now, I'm starting to take more online classes with you about the Yoga Sutras and the yoga philosophy, which I'm absolutely loving. And so the reason I would love to have you today, and I'd love to hear your background too, but the reason I asked you to come to chat with us today is in our community, what we're hearing a lot of people say, working with children's yoga, people are saying, okay, great, I can do the yoga postures, I can put a lesson together. But what I'm missing is the depth and meaning and how to add the yoga philosophy in a deeper way. So I'd love for us to have a little chat about how you can bring your experiences, because the classes I'm taking with you online are for adults, but how do we really realistically adapt this to work with children in an easy, practical way? So let's start with just your background. I'd love for you to share, your background, what your passion, your mission, so people can get to know you as I lovingly do.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's lovely that you speak about the early days because it was a very special time. It was a time before any of us had children. We were a lot younger. Yoga was a different, it was a completely different world at that point, especially here in Sydney. It was much less commercial than it is now. So it was a time of real community and connection and a very, very precious time in my heart. So I'm always so happy to have this connection with you. And just off topic tangentially, but I think it will be really interesting for your viewers to know. I remember so clearly coming to visit you in San Francisco when you and Luke moved back to the States. And I've said this to you before. And I remember you were at the very, very beginning of coming up with the idea for Kids Yoga Stories, and you were creating your first book. And I remember being in your office. I think I stayed the night and I may have slept in your office / guest room.
Yeah.
And you had all these post-it notes on the wall, and it was all just vision boarding and planning. And that was, I don't know, like 12 years ago, maybe
Yeah.
more.
Well, 11 years
Um,
ago. Yeah.
and I remember thinking, yes, she's got something here. Like I could feel the potency and the magic. And then fast forward more than 10 years and you've created an incredible range of offerings and a very successful business. So it's lovely for me to chat with you as well and just to be part of your life and part of the progression of Kids Yoga Stories.
Yeah.
As far as the philosophy piece goes and integrating the spiritual teachings of yoga within kids yoga, it's always an interesting question to me because people ask me this type of thing a lot, and they ask me about my family a lot. I have 5 children, and along with my partner, we have an extended family of 7 children. So many, busy household.
Right.
And really the best, I was thinking about this morning, like, what is it I want to share? Like, what are the golden nuggets? The biggest teaching I have, and I think this is as appropriate in a yoga, like a formal classroom yoga teaching context for children as it is just in everyday life, is to lead by example
Yeah.
and to get the teachings through under the radar. So whereas with adults, it might be helpful to explicitly talk about ahimsa or explicitly talk about, the Yoga Sutras or something like that. And adults who are interested will be, it'll be like a light bulb for them. Children really don't care. They're not interested in what the yoga scriptures had to say or, learning complicated Sanskrit verses. I mean, some children are actually. I have a friend whose child is learning Bhagavad Gita slokas at the moment. He's 9. And he has a gift for Sanskrit. So I don't want to say all children aren't, but I think that's an unusual case.
Right.
My children certainly aren't.
Right.
So a lot of the teachings come under the radar. They come in the form of the types of conversations that we have, the way that the conversations are steered, and me as a living example of someone living within yoga. So, I'll give you an example. One of the ways I practice yoga within my family is around the dinner table. We'll often spend time appreciating each other and appreciating our lives. And I'll ask the children to speak about what they're grateful for, what they find funny or entertaining, or what they love in their brothers. Sometimes we go around the table and I sort of have to force them a little bit. It's not, especially the teenagers, there's a lot of eye rolling,
Right.
but they come on board. They do this if I ask them to, in the right way. We might go around the table and each person will speak about someone sitting next to them, because we're such a big family that takes a while, and say something, nice about that person. What did you appreciate about this person? What do you love about your brother? This is all the practice of yoga. It's all part of yoga practice. If my kids are having problems at school, and my children range in age from 6 months old to 16 years old, so I've got a full spectrum. If there's a problem with a friendship, if there's a problem with something that happens at school, I'll talk about it very much through the lens of the yamas and the niyamas. So I try to live my life according to the ethical precepts of the yamas and the niyamas, which are Patanjali's guidelines for how to live an ethical life. And I try to not only model that for my kids, but also to then have those ideologies at the forefront of my mind in all of our interactions. And then if you're in a more formal context where you're actually teaching yoga to children in a sort of classroom situation or a group setting, these conversations can unfold without necessarily needing to be heavy or serious or conflicting with another religion or another ideology. They don't need to be named. We don't need to necessarily speak about the scriptures or the Sanskrit, but to bring those qualities, to bring in the quality of santosha, contentment, to bring in the quality of sausha, cleanliness. Let's clean up our mats. Let's tidy the yoga space when we've finished. That's a perfect example of living embodiment of one of the precepts without necessarily needing to kind of make it so explicit.
Exactly. I love that. One of the biggest takeaways I had when I learned from you in the beginning was that yoga is a lifestyle, that it wasn't just something that happened to us for that hour on the mat, but it really was. And you've written a book, right, about taking it beyond the mat. So how do we live it? How do we, like you say, embody it? And so another thing we hear a lot about, this is addressed here, that our community talks about, I can't do it because I don't have the time, I don't have the space, I don't have the money, I'm not very flexible. Right. And hands up, I remember saying that to you when I did yoga teacher training. I said, Katie, I would love to take this, but I'm the most inflexible person in the class. And you said, it doesn't have to be about that. In fact, you will attract students in your classes that will be also inflexible, and you get to be a role model, right, on the side. So but that's the thing I'm trying to get through to people, that it's not about just the moving postures. It's not just about the physical practice. It really is about who we be. Right. Yeah. It's about who we be. And you're talking about the yamas and niyamas, as simple as, how we carry ourselves into the room, how we take a deep breath before we come in, before we enter the room, so that we are calm and organized, so we can be of service to the children. Right. And when we're not, we've got a monkey mind, right? We can share that with the children, be models in that feelings come and go and emotions come and go, and we can be a model for that. We don't have to be perfect. Another thing that we hear, right, Katie, all the time is, oh, well, you're a yogi. You don't have these issues. Yes, we do. We have dysregulated children. We have lots of our own issues. I have my own sensitivities, all these things that, yes, we are embodying being human, right? Yeah. So we don't suppress ourselves, but instead we celebrate our emotions through the Yoga Sutras and the niyamas.
Yeah. And I think, such a big part of that is transparency and honesty. So one of the things I try hard to do as a teacher, whether it's with children and in the parenting role or teaching adults yoga, is to show up as who I am in the most authentic way possible. So there is no yogic persona. I'm not kind of putting on a facade and then leaving the yoga space and it's a completely different reality. I'm very open about what's going on with my children, what's going on in my life, within the bounds of being professional, of course, but there's a transparency there. And I think a couple of things came up when you were speaking just then that I think are very relevant in the conversation around teaching children yoga. One is, we have a lot of social etiquette in our culture and society that means that we often don't talk about what's really going on. So we have this kind of like, how are you? I'm good, la-di-da-di kind of approach to the way that we interact in social spaces. And I feel that the yoga space is an opportunity to cut through that, or cut beneath that a little bit, again, for adults as well as for children, and to have more authentic conversations. And it doesn't have to be therapy. It doesn't have to get really heavy,
Right.
but to be able to say, I'm feeling really sad. I'm feeling really overwhelmed. There's a lot going on for me right now. And just to be able to hold space for that as a teacher is such a great gift for a child, to be able to be in whatever emotion they're feeling and feel safe and feel that space is being held for that is such a blessing. It's such a gift. And often children don't feel able to express the fullness of how they're feeling and what's going on for them with their own parents, because they might be protecting their parents to a certain extent. Like, I know I got divorced a few years ago, and I know that when I was going through the divorce, it wouldn't always be me that my children came to, because they don't want to upset me or hurt me. They can see I'm going through enough myself, especially older children who have the emotional maturity, making sure they have other places they can go to. Like, one of my sons had a very good school teacher who became his confidant and became a very important role model in his life for that year of the first year of divorce. And I was in communication with the teacher, and I knew that he was confiding in his teacher, but actually that teacher played a very pivotal role in my son's journey through his parents' divorce, because he was a safe person to go to. And so providing that context within what you're teaching and within the class, the yoga class space, again, it doesn't have to be explicit, but just the feeling where the child can come in and the nervous system can let go, and permission is given to allow whatever comes up to come up. And part of what allows that is the teacher being comfortable in their own skin and being able to handle big stuff that may come up, and not going into the role of having to fix or bring solutions or sweep it under the carpet, but just simply be in the space of holding space. So that's one element. And then the other element, which is very closely linked to that, is to do with the physical body and this conversation around flexibility. You know, BKS Iyengar, one of the great gurus or the great yogic masters of the last 100 years, he said, if you can breathe, you can practice yoga. So it doesn't matter what capacity your physical body has. We've all got different strengths and weaknesses. Almost all of us at this particular time in history, in our particular culture and society, have elevated adrenaline, elevated stress hormones, anxiety. We're all spending too much time on screens, including young children. And the yoga space, from a spiritual perspective, putting all the scriptures and all the kind of heavy philosophy to one side, is just a place for people to come, adults and children alike, and for the nervous system to just have an exhale, to just have a moment to just go, I'm in this body, I can appreciate it, I can move it, I can feel my breath, I can become centered. I mean, that's just the biggest gift we can give people at this time, I think. From the CEOs of big companies to a 3-year-old. We all need more of just coming into the body, coming to the breath, a moment of mental space. You don't need to know very much technical information to be able to share that with someone. You just need to embody it and create the intention and create the sacred environment, which could be a classroom, could be a school classroom.
Exactly. So what you're saying there too, you gave that example at the beginning with your crew at dinner table, right? So in the yoga classroom, it could be about that beginning circle as well as a closing circle, right? So all those things that you said, if you're creating that safe space, you have a moment to get grounded, to get centered, and you create that routine every single time. So all the children know to sit in a circle. We're talking about young children, right? Also, depending on what age, right? And so they also get a chance, they can go around the gratitude or be thankful or, something about their day because they want to be heard, right? And so there's a busy school day, whatever. So to be able to share that in a safe place. So those are some practical ways of what you're talking about. So then I'm thinking, I can see my listeners saying, okay, yeah, that all sounds amazing, right? And I think about for myself, you see on their online, you see moms with their children sitting cross-legged, like that is not my child. So she doesn't want anything to do with yoga, right? And I also know a lot of our viewers are saying, Okay, that sounds wonderful, but that's not what is in reality. My children are high strung, they're tired, they're overactive, they're disruptive, they're rolling in the mat, that kind of thing. So idyllically, we love them to be in a circle like that. But what can we offer to folks who are in those situations where the children are sort of more wild and crazy?
I think it's about meeting the children where they're at rather than coming in with our own agenda. So if you've decided on Tuesday at 10 a.m. you're going to do half an hour of yoga with your child, you may or may not get lucky on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Yeah. But there are opportunities for these yogic teaching moments all the time. The other day I was walking down the street with my children. It was heavily raining, and my younger two, so my 8-year-old and 5-year-old, heavily raining. We were going to the cafe to get some hot chocolate, and we saw a homeless woman sitting in a doorway, and it was wet, and her clothes were wet, and she looked very unhappy. And one of my sons said, "Oh, Mum, she's having a hard time." And then my other son said, "She looks a bit scary," and she did look a bit scary, like for a young child. It was confronting. And I said to the boys, I feel a little bit nervous to approach her, but I also feel sad for her. Why don't we ask her if she'd like a cup of coffee? And so we went up to her and we said, "Would you like a cup of coffee?" And she was so grateful. And we went to the cafe, we got our hot chocolates, we came back, we brought her a coffee. And my 8-year-old actually remembered, because I'd forgotten in the cafe, he was like, "Mum, don't forget to get the coffee for the lady." And so I got the coffee, we gave it to her. And we spoke a little bit about, how we can show up in service and be good members of the community, and very, not in a big, heavy, long way, but just it was a moment, right? Right. To me, that's the embodiment of yoga in life. It's showing my children, okay, I'm feeling confronted. This is a confronting situation. I feel a bit helpless and powerless, but there's something gentle I can do. I can offer something small. Maybe it had an impression on them, maybe it didn't, but that's, to me, the living yoga is like when the moments arise. And there might be a time when I'm on my mat and I'm doing my own asana practice and my kids come along and they want to join in, right? And then sometimes I'll get irritated by that because I'm trying to do my own practice, it's annoying. But there they are presenting themselves. It might not be the agenda I had of the time I'd allotted to do yoga with them, but they're actually showing up and wanting to be involved. So it's taking those moments. I mean, one of the things that happens at my kids' school is they practice flexible learning spaces, which is wonderful. So the children are allowed to, at different, and they go to a regular public school. It's not like a Steiner school or anything like that, but they are allowed to take some movement, take some time out, like have some autonomy around what their needs are in a particular moment to facilitate better learning. Yeah. And I love that because we're teaching the kids to actually be responsive to what's going on for them. Yeah. So I think so much of how yoga is going to evolve, again, it mirrors adults and children alike, is as a tool that supports our lives rather than this is my yoga practice and I have to do it at this time in this particular way.
Right. Exactly.
It's like as a mum, if I wake up in the morning and my 5 kids are driving me crazy and I'm feeling frazzled and everything's overwhelming, my immediate question is, okay, what tools do I have in my yogic toolkit that can help me? Do I need to do some breathing? Do I need to take a quick shower and just recenter myself? There's so many tools available to us. So I want to do some chanting. And then I can reset myself within 10-15 minutes. Right. It's not always about rolling out the mat and moving through sun salutations. And then the other thing is, I feel it's very important to think about the idea of sowing seeds rather than an end result, right? So I always think with my kids, I can't control everything that's happening to them. I can't control all the influences in their lives, some of which I don't like. But I can sow the seeds that might blossom into deeper thinking or a more connected way of being in the world. I'll give you a quick example, and this is actually a lovely one that would translate into a kids yoga class. So I did a practice recently with a group of children in my child's school, and we had a candle in the middle of the circle. We were doing some circle work. And I said to the children, we're going to blow out the candle and I'd like each of you to make a wish, like a birthday, like you blow out on a birthday cake. But instead of wishing for something for yourself, I'd like your wish to be for someone else. So this is another very simple way of bringing some yogic teachings in. Every kid's familiar with the concept of blowing out a candle and making a wish. And usually it's, I want a toy, or I want, whatever. To just reframe that and say, actually, you have enough. We all have enough. Let's think about someone who might need something that we can make a wish for them. And afterwards, I invited the children to share, and I didn't make each child share. That's important too, to give the children autonomy to share only when they want to, and to allow them privacy if they'd like to maintain that sense of like not sharing. And one of the children said, oh, I thought about my grandfather. He passed away. He died recently. And I just remembered my grandfather, and I blew out the candle and thought of him. And I thought, wow, that's such a beautiful opportunity that this child would not necessarily have had. And again, no one said to him, think about your grandfather, or, now it's your grandfather's funeral and it's time to grieve and mourn. It wasn't a formal scenario. It's just, that's what landed for that child in that moment. And those little seeds of awareness, those little opportunities, you never know what an impression they might have on a young child.
Right. I love that. And I think that's the thing, is that the spectrum, right? I think sometimes people have a hard time minding that gap, like where they are now, and they have this thought of, if only I was, this kind of yoga teacher, or this classroom teacher incorporating yoga, right? And it's about, we've always talked about exactly what you're saying there, planting things, but just taking it step by step and going on your own journey. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, right? And then you're adding in, being authentic to what you're interested in, your own practices, your own passion, enthusiasm, and that will come in. So for example, no one told you, no one gave you a book and said, you have to go in and put a candle and ask. It was something that came to you in that moment, right? For you to share. It was authentic and meaningful. So there was, and you had no agenda, right? And you're thinking about what's going to serve the children best in this moment.
Yeah.
Right.
And the thing about children, I mean, I always think it's so hard to work with children because they don't have the social filter that adults have. So adults might think something but not say it, whereas a child will just say it. Right. But I've learned to reframe that for myself now, and absolutely celebrate that, because what a relief, as adults, we go through life with this social kind of, mask, and children just say it. They just say it. And sometimes it's a bit shocking, or a bit like, goodness, socially inappropriate, but what a relief to be in a space with these little humans who express the fullness of their experience. I think it's so beautiful.
Yeah, I love it. And especially with you being originally from England, my parents are British, I'm Canadian. So we come already with some cultural differences, and moving to Australia, right, where people say what's on their minds. So you and I probably had to go through some cultural awareness, right, when we first went there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And, I say to my kids all the time, the only filter is kindness. You can say whatever you want, you can express everything's open for conversation, but we're going to be kind about it. And I see that in my teenagers now. I have a really good open relationship with both my eldest children. It sometimes is difficult because they tell me things I don't necessarily want to hear. Like, I think about how I was with my parents, and there was a lot more not talking about things.
Yes.
But that open dialogue from a young age, I think that's one of the biggest gifts of teaching yoga to young children, is actually it teaches them to be in their bodies comfortably and to communicate openly. It's really beautiful.
And you've taught us this, right, through the thoughts, words, and actions, right? And so that's super important for us to understand where those thoughts are coming from, that we are not just saying the words of kindness, but it authentically coming from from our thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that our thoughts are not always real. I do teach my kids, and I think in the yogic environment, we can teach children to notice that your thoughts are not always real. So for example, we could talk about a situation where we think someone else is thinking something about us, and we could remind ourselves that they may well not be thinking that thing. Like one of my kids had a haircut recently that he didn't like, and he went to school and he was self-conscious because he thought his hair looked silly, and he was embarrassed. And he said to me at the end of the day, everyone was looking at my hair. I'm sure, like in his mind, his hairstyle was the the biggest news that day.
Right.
And I said to him, did anyone say anything? And he said, no one said anything. And I was like, honestly, it's probably 90% in your mind. You
Right.
think everyone's thinking about your hairstyle, but actually most people haven't even noticed.
Right.
And that's a piece of yogic teaching right there. That's actually profound yoga philosophy. It's what Patanjali shares with us in the first chapter of the Yoga Sutras. Your mind, your monkey mind, is not to be relied upon. What you think is going on out there and what people are thinking and saying and doing, all oriented around you. Most people are just in their own bubble of their own stuff. And it's the same with children. So just, again, sowing that seed very early on of like, you're not, what you think is going on out there may not be the case, especially if it's a sort of low self-worth narrative.
Right.
That's a very powerful thing to learn as a young child.
I think too, a lot of our teachers are saying, what if I do it wrong, or what if I say something wrong? And I know you've quoted, is it Maya Angelou, something about when you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
Like that, right?
Yeah.
And so you always teach us that, this is the teaching I have available right now, because you are such a master of study and research with the Yoga Sutras. And then it may change over time. And I think that that's something for us to share, all of us to think about. Like, we're doing our best that we can, but it's better to do something than nothing.
Yes.
Learn something about the ancient wisdom of yoga and practice that. And then once you know more, integrate that a little by little. Like you said, it's about those seeds.
Absolutely. And to admit your humanity and admit that, I may not get it right. I mean, I think another very precious gift we can give children is our capacity to apologize.
Right.
To say, I didn't quite get that right. I'm doing my best. I'm sorry.
Right.
And that models something so precious to young children that, love can still be there, even if behavior isn't always perfect. Like, I shout at my kids. I become overwhelmed. I'm sometimes not giving them the full attention that they deserve. And usually I will apologize for that afterwards. And it creates a very healthy dynamic of, it's okay to make a mistake, and it's also okay to make amends.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much, Katie. Now, before we go, one of the things I love about your newsletter, you share books that you read. So do you have a favorite book or something to share with us that you're currently reading, or something favorite?
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so many. I mean, actually, I've gone back recently to the Magic 10 and Beyond, which is from my teacher, Sharon Gannon. Sharon is the founder of the Jivamukti Yoga method, and Magic 10 and Beyond is all about her own morning practice. So it includes a short 10 posture sequence that you can do in 10 minutes, which is fantastic if you've got time pressure, but also talks about the rituals and the routines that she goes through on a daily basis. And there's a lot in there that can be taken in small little bite-sized chunks. I mean, one of the things in that book actually that she shares is feeding the birds or feeding your pets, like feeding your cat or your dog, could be a yogic practice. Right. If we do it in a way that is all about service for another living being. So this is a beautiful one that translates for children. When you've got a pet and you look after that pet, you're actually practicing karma yoga or seva by showing up in service of another living being, and so many other nuggets of wisdom in that book. So yeah, I've read it before, but I'm revisiting it at the moment, and it's one of those books you can come back to and get different things at different times. So it's a favorite.
I love that. I've talked before with our community about the anchor of feeding my chickens. So collecting the eggs. So every day I go up there, and for some reason it's this spiritual practice of like just the anchor of being outdoors every day, no matter what's going on. I'm by myself. I chat with my chickens. They're just so, I don't know, they're so zen. They get along and they're outdoors and they're fun. Yeah, I just love it. And it's like that, just bringing intention. We're probably already doing a lot of these practices, whether we walk to school in the morning, or, after school, you're picking up your children. You're doing all these practices anyway. It's just about bringing intention behind it. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, actually, just one last thing I'll add around that idea of the walk to school, or the things we're doing anyway, even driving in the car, is noticing the environment, noticing nature. We live in the city, it's pretty concrete and urban where we live, but I'll always say to the kids, notice that the blossoms are coming, notice that the leaves are falling, notice that the sun's beautiful today, notice the rain, we spend so much of our time looking at screens. I really try to bring in the yoga of the natural world and that our connection to it, just in these tiny little ways.
Yeah. And mindfulness is definitely very popular in classrooms and studios everywhere. So definitely to add easily. Well, thank you so much. So how can we find you and sharing your offerings that I've been sucking up, so to speak? I've been absolutely enjoying and loving your online courses. Where can we find you, and what are your upcoming offerings that you have?
Yeah, well, everything's on my website, which is bhaktirose.com.au. I'm sure we can pop it in the notes with this video. And at the moment, I have a free introduction to Ayurveda for adults course. So if anyone wants to learn a little bit more about Ayurveda, which is yoga's sister science and wellness model, there's a free mini course that people can sign up for. So I'll make sure the link is available as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Katie. Really
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
All right, my dearest. Take good care. Sending love.
Bye.
Bye.